Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to our series entitled Transforming the Future of Land Management. My name is Matthew Morris. I'm a land steward with the Duchy of Cornwall, and I'm delighted to be your host along with Tim Hopkin, who is the founder of the Land app and whose technical skills have made all this possible. This is our third episode in the series. I think it's fair to say that we're seeing a bit of a snowball effect. We now have over 1,000 people registered for these webinars, which is absolutely fantastic. In the last week, we've seen many local authorities register, along with land agents, private estates, farmers and government advisors. Welcome to you all. So why am I involved? Well, as far as the Duchy of Cornwall goes, the natural environment is our core essence. It's our most precious resource. It provides a basis to grow food and a place in which communities can thrive and prosper, both economically and socially. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, whose words were published in Country Life this week, reminds us all of the crucial importance of nature to our well-being and to our very existence. His Royal Highness also urges us to pledge ourselves as we come out of this crisis to build back better and not lose sight of probably the greatest threat multiplier of them all, global warming, and its most obvious symptom of climate change. These sessions are therefore an opportunity to bring professionals and practitioners from across the sector together so we can test opinion, hear the latest thoughts, and hopefully contribute to the natural capital debate, and perhaps even come up with some solutions agreed by consensus. I'll shortly hand over to Tim, who will introduce our guest speakers today, and Tim will also give you an overview of some of the tools that we're going to use in this webinar. A quick bit of housekeeping: you can hopefully all see and hear me. A reminder of those who are new to Zoom that you can do very little in these webinars other than cut yourselves off. Your camera and microphone will remain off throughout the session. And today's webinar will last approximately 1 hour. And once again, the RICS have confirmed that this will qualify as CPD for those chartered surveyors amongst us. During the session today, there'll be an element of interaction with a live poll with a number of key questions, the results of which we will share on our website. There'll also be an opportunity to put questions to our two speakers through our Q&A button, and Tim's going to explain how that works, and I will then host the question session towards the end of the session. So that's enough from me. Tim, I'm going to hand over to you now to give us an overview of the session today, introduce our guest speakers, and guide us through the technical bits. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Matthew, and welcome everyone to this webinar series. So yes, as Matthew said, my name is Tim Hopkin. I'm the founder of the Land app, which is an easy-to-use digital mapping platform for rural land managers. It's a real pleasure to be able to bring this to you today. We have a couple of great speakers today. We have David Hill from the Environment Bank, who is going to be sharing a presentation entitled Habitat Banks, a partnership with planning authorities to enable delivery of biodiversity net gain, and Alex Robinson from Nature Capital, who is going to be presenting on unlocking value from natural capital. And before we get into the presentations, for those who've attended these before, you'll know exactly what we're about to do. And for those who haven't, we are about to do a interactive survey. So we have a question we would love your answers to. The question is, what could be the single most powerful output of this webinar series? And I'm going to send that question down to you right now through the chat function. So that's coming right now. What you'll see with this, when you do get the links, find it in the chat function. All you need to do is hit escape on your keyboard to minimize Zoom. Take that link and paste it into a browser, and then you'll be able to answer the question. So I can see a few answers are coming in already. Thank you. So for those who haven't yet done it, please hit escape, get the link from the chat function, paste it into a browser, and then in the browser, you'll be able to answer the question within Slido. And you each have the option to answer as many times as you want. So please, yeah, I will let you do that now. There we go. Here they start coming. So I've just pasted the link again. Brilliant, thank you. So here they come. So what have we got? Understanding, working stronger together, opportunities, practitioners. Together is coming up a lot. Networking is coming up a lot. Customers, interestingly, is coming up. Knowledge. Knowledge is starting to fly to the front. And anyone who's answering, you can answer as many times as you want, I believe. So here we go. For those who can't see the link, thank you those that are actually sharing. The link is coming through in the chat function. So hopefully you can see that, and just take that link out of the chat function and paste it into your browser, and then you'll be able to answer. Great. More and more. Understanding, knowledge, natural capital. Assuming those are all tied together. Teamwork. I really like that. Knowledge exchange, industry consensus, momentum, ideas, net gain. Yes. Great. Keep answering. If anyone's struggling, just let me know on the chat function. I'm going to continue to try and just point everyone. Okay, Tom, Asta, there you go. Hopefully you can see it now. Okay, for those who are answering the chat function, please do use the link. I'm going to keep sending it out so people can see it. Please use the link that I'm sending out to answer the Slido questions. Oh, hold on. Let me get it up to there. Sorry, those who couldn't see it. Now it's come through to everyone. Brilliant. Sorry, everyone. That was my fault. That wasn't coming through to all of you. So I suspect now you all have the link. You should be great. Sorry, Ben Carlstang. Right, now there'll be a torrent of answers. Wow, it's really clear, isn't it? Knowledge, collaboration, understanding, natural capital, ideas. Right, great. 100 answers already. Knowledge is sitting out way ahead of everything else. Understanding, collaboration, better understanding, vision. We have a piece on vision. We are going to be starting to put together our vision statement for this webinar series. So all of this is going to be filtering into that. So working out of silos, partnership, shared vision, better understanding, policy change, inspiration, a lot of inspiration for those that want that. And we'll make sure you're all connected to the speakers after this, so please feel free to reach out to them. And we do actually have a LinkedIn group, which you're welcome to join as well. I'll paste a link for that after this session, so you can all join in on that and join the conversation. Brilliant, everyone. Keep an eye. Fantastic, 158 answers. And I'm going to make available all of these answers on LinkedIn later, so do keep an eye out for that. Brilliant. Great, thank you. I can see a few people are still answering the chat function. We're going to be doing a couple more of these later. Do remember just to take the link out, put it into your browser. This time I will send it out to all of you. Great, thank you, everybody. We're going to stop that now. And I think that is a very clear consensus. Brilliant, thank you so much, everybody. Right, well, without any further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to hand over to David Hill from the Environment Bank, who is presenting on Habitat Banks, a partnership with planning authorities to enable delivery of biodiversity net gain. David, over to you. I'll let you share your screen.
Thank you. Might take me 1 second to make sure I'm doing this correctly. And let's see if that works. Can you see that?
Yes, we can, David. Yep.
Great. Okay.
Great.
Welcome, everyone, and great that you've joined today for this fantastic series of events. I'm David Hill. I founded and I chair the Environment Bank. Back in 2007, I was concerned that development wasn't really delivering great value for biodiversity and that we weren't doing things correctly. So I've been lobbying hard, and eventually it looks like we've got Biodiversity Net Gain to be part of the mandated part of the planning system. What I'm going to talk about here is a partnership with planning authorities that we're putting together and offering to enable delivery of biodiversity net gain. I should say I also chair the charity Plant Life, and I sit on something called the Food Farming and Countryside Commission. We've got lots of interesting things all coming together and interlinking. And I've actually, in the process of setting up the Environment Bank as the Environment Bank Foundation, which is going to be a not-for-profit. So that will be a really interesting innovation. So without further ado, well, we know that the Environment Bill will mandate a minimum 10% biodiversity net gain. All planning authorities will be required to deliver it. Developers will need to submit a biodiversity gain plan showing where the 10% above the baseline condition will be delivered. And while some biodiversity net gain will be on site, that's for sure, it is very expensive. I can talk to you more about that at another point. And it isn't that great, I don't think, for biodiversity. So we're talking about brokering large-scale sites by raising conservation credits on land, creating habitat and managing it for 30 years, something that we've called habitat banks. We're looking at setting up partnerships with planning authorities to help them and provide the end-to-end solution for them in the future. So at the moment, there are a good number of planning authorities already dipping their toe in the water. This shows a map of those. And of the 380, I think 90 or so are already engaged or engaging. So what is a habitat bank? Well, they're 40 to 100 hectares areas of land dedicated to biodiversity restoration. They can provide value added by being linked to existing sites of conservation value, which is better, bigger and joined, and much better for biodiversity. And we use delivery agents of landowners, farmers, wildlife trusts, other conservation NGOs and community benefit societies. The Environment Bank's job is to validate it all, raise and register and validate the biodiversity unit gains from land management using the government metric, which is a industry standard. And we take on all the contractual arrangements with the landowners and developers. So this graphic shows four parts to how it works. And this is how we think the Habitat Bank will deliver biodiversity net gain for developments and I'm talking here to the planning authority, as if you were a planning authority. So on the first part, it says development assessment. We go and measure the impacts and work out the compensation that's needed, or we validate those that are done by others. We then work out the compensation requirement once any BNG on site has been proposed and shown and validated. And then the Habitat Bank is set up and that sells conservation credits to the developer under a conservation credit purchase agreement and a letter of sale. And then the biodiversity benefits are shown there, enhances land for long-term biodiversity and societal benefits with a biodiversity management plan. You'll see this slide, you'll get this slide in the pack, so I won't look at the detail of this, but the role of conservation credits is pretty critical insofar as it enables a functioning market to be involved in the supply, the banking and the brokerage of sale of these credits, which is where we register the value from. I won't go into the detail of that, but basically there's the supply of habitat banks, the administration of the conservation credits and the sale of those to developers, all of which we do. The first thing that we would want to do with a planning authority is to look at what the demand requirement would be for a 5 to a 20-year planning horizon. And this shows you this is a real life example. It shows you an example of, you see the top 4 lines there, 584 hectares that will be allocated for development in this particular region. And if you look at in the box towards the left, of that 584 hectares, if we assume a net developable area of 80%, obviously big, large developments can get 60% net developable area, but we've taken an 80% value. That gives 460 hectares to be developed. If you then apply the UK land cover statistics to a 100 hectare area on average, that yields around 358 biodiversity units that's on that land that will be lost. So the amount lost for this example is around 670 units. If you add your 10% gain and it gets you to 1,837 credits. And based on something like between 240 and 320 credits for a 40 hectare woodland or wood meadow, as an example in this case, we would need 230 hectares to compensate properly for that 584 hectares loss. So we do that analysis for planning authorities. The habitat types that we are promoting wildflower meadows and grasslands, wood meadows. So the Wood Meadows Trust has been doing a lot of work in this area and has come up with some great methodologies and showcase an example at the Escrick estate, which is terrific if you ever get a chance to go and see it. Woodlands, of course, and I'm not just here talking about tree planting. There's a great difference between planting trees and creating a woodland, as I'm sure you know. Wetlands, and then rewilding. We think that large-scale conservation through rewilding can have value and actually ought to be funded in some shape or form by the sorts of value that Biodiversity Net Gain can bring to the operation. The two main things that conservation has ever had in its whole, say, 100-year history or more has been access to land and access to finance. If we get the access to finance correct, which we can through Biodiversity Net Gain, if it's done properly, we can get the access to land at scale. And if we're going to deliver 500,000 hectares of a nature recovery network, that's a lot of money, and it's going to take the private sector to get involved at proper rates for doing so. In terms of setup and management, there are three parts to it really. If you look at the left-hand side, I'm talking there about what do we do for a developer. So we engage with the developers, either with the planning authority as part of the assessment of the application or directly for the developer themselves. But we treat our work in an independent way. We measure the impacts of a development in biodiversity units using the industry metric, because that's an objective, solid, standardized methodology for working out what the biodiversity units on a development site are. And we also will give help in creating the biodiversity gain plan or gain report that would be provided for the developer that he has to now submit with his application in the future when this is mandated. In the middle sits the habitat bank that we will have found, and we find that with or in partnership with the planning authority and with various stakeholders. And we also want to look for choice so that there is no ransoming involved in all of this. I can talk more about that later if need be. But the habitat bank is essentially established, and where the planning authority works in partnership with us, this gives certainty to third-party investors. And third-party investors are really important in funding the startup, the creation of a habitat bank from which those conservation credits will be raised and that we then administer on behalf of that habitat bank. We have a conservation bank agreement with the landowner, farmer or conservation body. And it's a 30-year agreement which satisfies the compliance of the, as will be in the Environment Act when the bill's enacted. And then we have a biodiversity management plan, and the landowner farmer gets paid in accordance with delivering the objectives of that plan. So at the moment where biodiversity is created or retained obviously within a planning development site, there is very little proper enforcement and deliverability over that into the future, because obviously planning authorities are pretty strapped financially, and there is just not the resource to do it. And I think at the last count, only 31% actually had ecologists on board working with them and for them. So obviously we also work with wildlife trusts as well in terms of identifying where land can be. And we're just about to, we started actually setting up a large inventory called the Nature Network Registry, which is looking at large scale habitat restoration schemes, including rewilding, but also lots of other initiatives from, for example, where living landscape sites are, because these will identify already spatially where we would like to perhaps see that biodiversity net gain funding being targeted. And of course, nationally and locally, we know that that there is work being done on national and local strategic frameworks for nature recovery network, etc. So we work with all of that, and we'll spatially work with that to identify where those habitat banks can sit so that they give us the best banks for our books. And then the work that we do with the planning authority, I've mentioned the demand analysis undertaken on their behalf. We then sell the credits, track their sales against demand. We assess future need, because obviously as credits get sold or extinguished from Habitat Bank, we need to know where the next credits are going to come from. So there'll be a rolling program of creating those habitat banks. And we provide the annual monitoring and habitat bank reporting to the Planning Authority so that that aligns with their biodiversity duty reporting too. In terms of finance, we think there are 3 areas that we will be funding through this. The tier 1, this is where the majority of the income from sales of conservation credits will go, and that will be held by our not-for-profit Environment Bank Foundation. And we take brokerage and transaction costs for the works for doing that. Then there's tier 2, and this is we think this will equate to between 5 to 10% of the net credit values that we will spend with conservation NGOs and other relevant bodies to extend nature reserves or set up bespoke conservation sites. They might be projects that might, for example, be involved with within field management interventions to increase biodiversity or to create wildlife corridors, etc. And then there's a 3rd tier, which is a pot of funding that we will ring fence, and local young people will be asked to bid to finance setting up small environmental projects in their area, such as at ward level. So there's 3 tiers which will satisfy the demand for the sorts of environmental projects. And I sat on the Ecosystem Markets Task Force some years ago, and we thought that the actual value of biodiversity net gain would be in the region of about £1.2 billion per annum. And when we consider how much we're spending on biodiversity conservation at the moment, but biodiversity is still not going well, we really do need to get this level of investment directly into new habitat creation and restoration schemes at scale. In terms of timeline, well, 2020, we know, although there are problems at the moment, aren't there, but the Environment Bill is progressing through Parliament. It will come back hopefully very soon. We then look at the detail of what the Habitat Bank will look like with its management objectives, the logistics planning being defined. We're in the process of raising the initial investments, probably of around 10 million or so, to start the first few habitat banks with chosen planning authorities. We sign an MOU with that planning authority. The credit calculations are made, the biodiversity management plan's written, and the habitat bank prospectus will be written and submitted and agreed with the planning authority, so that we set up the detailed demand analysis again, and that we've got a system that's oven ready to go to sell credits to developers. And then we've got the Environment Bill hopefully enacted in law next year, and so on. And then we've got reporting through from 2022 to 2024, etc., to the planning authority. Very quickly, the benefits. Well, for the environment, biodiversity has to be the top one. Biodiversity enhancement through habitat creation and long-term management. Carbon sequestration, of course. Land taken out of intensive agriculture, which removes it from pesticide use, conserving soils and reducing runoff. Large-scale improvements to landscape quality, and the creation of a land use mosaic and a richer, more diverse land cover. For the development industry, the value is very significant because it gives a quick, cost-effective and transparent solution for developers to deliver their biodiversity net gain requirement, delivering real biodiversity value that doesn't constrain a development needlessly, and it removes their 30-year liability for managing land within their development site that makes little contribution to biodiversity conservation. And we can have lots of debates around what biodiversity is for. Our focus is to create big-scale biodiversity restoration in the wider environment. Great value for local people, because the sites that we're setting up would look at creating really great new areas for wildlife, but also some access for people to those for quiet recreation, and providing a major uplift of placemaking for local people, etc. And also, of course, a significant income stream for farmers, landowners and conservation bodies. And then finally, the benefits for planning. It makes all the development compliant with the national and local policy and demonstrates leadership, etc. So that it can generate pride in people's local environment. So quick summary. We are in the process now of setting up partnerships with planning authorities, bringing forward large habitat banks. The LPAs can deliver their biodiversity duties, and we determine the development demand. We measure impacts in biodiversity units, which is an objective assessment, and we look to finance an ecologist within the LPAs we work with to ensure all the development is assessed. We identify with those LPAs the strategic location for habitat creation and the restoration and enhancements that are required. And we establish and manage all the contractual arrangements with the landowners, manage the whole end-to-end process. And we undertake all the contractual arrangements with the developers so that it's easy, cost-effective for them to deliver their biodiversity net gain requirements. And we think really this is a win-win for nature conservation, planning and development, local people, opportunities for obviously health and well-being, climate change resilience, landscape quality and local governance. And that's a really quick run through. I know that you will get this presentation through the Land app, but very happy to take questions either now or over the coming days as those questions might come to you. And thank you very much for listening.
Brilliant, David. Thank you so much for that really concise run through. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please do use the Q&A function. I can see that's being used quite a lot. And in there, you can actually upvote questions. So if there's something particularly topical, and you can add comments in as well, which might actually help Matt at the end. Just go through those and ask David the questions. And we'll be sending out an email at the end of this with contact details for David should you want to get in touch, which I'm sure you will. We also do have a LinkedIn group as well, which again, the conversation can continue within that group. Brilliant. Well, thank you, David. Now we're on to the second speaker, Alex Robinson from Nature Capital, with a presentation on unlocking value from natural capital. Brilliant. There you are, Alex.
Thanks very much, Tim. Let me just share my screen now. So you've all got it.
Brilliant. Got that.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. The brief Tim's given me for this webinar is about how to access natural capital payment opportunities. And I want to make 3 key points, and there's 3 key points that I'd like to focus on. Firstly, to outline what we mean by natural capital in the market context, and what some of the ecosystem service opportunities that can be realised. Secondly, to briefly explain our approach, our methodology, and how it can be practically applied. And thirdly, to demonstrate using a case study from our international work, how we can unlock value and inform decision making. So part of the problem with natural capital is that it means different things to different people, and it's not always well understood. We take a simple market approach because we believe natural capital frames the environment as a productive asset and includes it in economic decision making. So recognition of its value is vital, particularly when revenue opportunities have not historically reflected their significance. So through our approach, we see an asset. So this can be soil, grasslands, woodlands, water, wetlands, biodiversity, as something that underpins a current realized value in the form of, say, agriculture or timber production. These are the more obvious ecosystem services provided, but there are often less visible services provided too. Including, this can include carbon sequestration, natural flood defenses, water filtration, and species habitat, and they can have associated payment streams as well. And this is quite often what we take for granted, or we just assume is happening to the full potential. It's critical to see the wider environmental impacts that a landholding is currently providing, as well as their worth and the potential of what it could provide. It doesn't matter that these additional services are secondary or tertiary to what's often a primary revenue source. They're still of importance and still of value. And it's the monetization of this value in the form of payments for ecosystem services that our approach seeks to unlock. So where's the money coming from? That's always top of everybody's list. Everybody wants to know it. And primarily you've got potential revenue streams can come from public or private sources. So this figure represents the 4 broad revenue streams in silos. So public subsidy, landholders will ultimately jump through the set of hoops if they want the public subsidy. But the private payments, primarily in the form of corporate offsetting, generally with a carbon focus, ecosystem service payments, generally from a water focus, but air started to creep in there, and biodiversity net gain from a development focus, are far more difficult to achieve. So how can we identify natural capital payment opportunities, and what are the key factors that are important to informing a deal? So David has eloquently and in more detail spoken about net gain, but I would just highlight the importance of these three factors: proximity, scale, and impact. Developers need to look to third-party landholders for land to deliver this, and as such, these factors become important. Corporate offset. Carbon likely will form a central aspect to any deal, but it's not just about carbon. We believe that the recognition of biodiversity and social worth will help enhance and facilitate corporate offset. So this is where you see your carbon plus deal, that corporate offset, so carbon plus biodiversity, carbon plus social. And the wider and greater impact that this approach achieves makes a deal more attractive. So ultimately, corporate offset is about realizing a deal between a landholding and a partnership. That landholding or partnership and the offset partner or partners, which means it's not the same as a straight carbon credit deal. So let's just address additionality, because that's always what comes up here. Concept of additionality in the UK has been a major handbrake to achieving carbon-based deals. Additionality, and that's alongside the high startup costs that the European Union's ETS emission trading system had, as well as the gold standard or the RED Plus accreditations often used internationally, means that really tree planting or permanent land use change are the only options if you want to access this type of system. That's not to say that corporates don't want additionality, and they absolutely will do, because they want the most bang for their buck. But offset plus deals are not beholden to the same straitjacketed rules around additionality. So of course, detailed and accurate carbon calculations, measurements, and verification are critical, but the proximity afforded when both parties are within the UK adds to that accountability. And I'm going to touch on this a little bit later in our international case study. Soil often sits between these offset and ecosystem service opportunities. So soil, particularly peats, which can act as a significant carbon sink, where management practices affecting their quality and condition are really important in their ability to sequestrate and store carbon. So just by way of an example, improving soil organic matter content is just part of the solution to sequestering more carbon. If you're not measuring that and you aren't able to demonstrate that, you're not going to be able to access any of those potential opportunities. Ecosystem services in general tends to be focused around water quality, and there's lots of good examples out there of water companies working with partnered landscapes in order to improve water quality and mitigate some of their filtration costs, and particularly after, frankly, the horrendous winter that we've got through and the amount of rain we've had. Upstream flood alleviation schemes will start to gain traction as well. Man-made barriers, quite simply, they're very expensive and they only work to a certain level. There's also zero additionality. So wetland creation in the right place could have an impact on all of these. Competitive advantage represents how businesses may benefit from incorporating environmental benefits and upside in their strategies. It may be on their holding alongside their current primary income generation focus. So, for example, for a solar or wind or a forestry fund, or by offering investors greater environmental or social impact through their investment, whilst also ensuring a financial return. That's the sort of the ESG part of the criteria, because those guys are able to add value and recognition to their product. Look, let's just make this really simple. This is not philanthropy. Philanthropy can get us so far, but actually there needs to be financial upside for significant impact to be realized across the board and across the country. And I just want to quickly tip my hat to marketing and reputation management in the bottom center there, because this is significant as well. This is how businesses and products that choose to be carbon neutral or sustainably sourced are able to differentiate themselves from other businesses and products. And hats off to the likes of Microsoft, who have committed to removing their historical carbon footprint, by way of an example. But so what does this mean for your business? Well, simply, it's about trying to monetize these options and how they fit within the dynamics of risk and return. So we look at this as trying to building a yield stack or revenue stack for your business. You've got core farm benefits or core benefits that you can have initially. So that might come in the form of improved soil and therefore crop margins, or competitive advantage that I've just mentioned when selling your products or your farm service, or providing that extra degree of climate resilience. I'm sure anyone who's got it available to them enhances their yield stack with the likes of BPS, countryside stewardship, high level stewardship. And I suspect where available, they'll do this for elms as well. This is relatively low risk and is likely to be widely accessible. Many holdings have diversified with renewables or tourism. Let's take glamping for an example. Can a glamping experience be enhanced by the benefits of other natural capital opportunities like biodiversity net gain? In many cases, yes, I absolutely believe they can be. Private deals like those we've mentioned have gone through. So the returns are of course related to risk and likelihood, and they're obviously very property specific. Some won't be relevant, available, or possibly even appropriate for all. But where they are, they can start to open up and access these income streams. So what do natural capital opportunities discuss? What do they all need? Simply put, information that provides a solution. So we've got enough uncertainty out there, and that was before we added the implications of COVID-19 to the mix. We've got uncertainty around elms and as it's formulated, uncertainty around the development of this nascent private market, and that's exactly what this is. Uncertainty around defined measurement standards and the fact that measurements themselves don't translate into money. We feel that it's advisable that if landholders want to benefit from these opportunities as they come online, they need to position for them now. So the private market requires all parties to be proactive and entrepreneurial. How can you go out there, source a deal, negotiate, and secure those payments if you're not entrepreneurial and proactive? Do we actually believe they're going to come to us? So that's where Nature Capital are positioned. We're there to bridge the gap between the data measurement and the market. This middle piece in terms of recognizing and quantifying the natural capital is critical to informing and realizing the benefits. So whilst I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've got all the answers, what I do have is a rigorous market approach that can provide a clear framework to support decision making. So you're wondering what our methodology is. And well, if you as a landholder, land manager, landowner, if you were to come to us, we would apply our natural capital realization model. So this looks at 6 special impact factors and allows us to quantify the worth, impact, and potential of the natural capital present on your holding. So let's start with land use. So land use is an assessment of the landholding's category, scale, and condition. And biodiversity, this looks in particular at the presence of at-risk species and the habitat's diversity and their significance. Connectivity represents how the landholding within the context of its wider landscape and surroundings, and it recognises the impacts of the likes of the buffer zone, for example. Hope, so this is originated sort of out of hope value, and this sets the landholding in the context of the national picture, representing where there's a limited supply and or a growing demand nationally. And it's really important to have your specific property in mind, but also what's happening in the national picture as well. Ecosystem integrity. So this is about recognizing the impact of the 4 categories of relevant ecosystem services. So supporting, regulating, provisioning, and cultural. And this is really important because it demonstrates what services we as humans are being provided by that landholding. And sustainability. So sustainability is measured over time by setting a series of key performance indicators aligned to the objectives that have been set and compared against the baseline. And this enables value to be calculated, but also to be built over a period of time. So we utilize 40 standardized metrics, but ultimately our model is only as good as the information that we can feed into it. In light of property specific data, we can apply local or national information so that we can, as a bare minimum, provide an assessment of the whole to inform your decision making. So yes, of course, we'd like more detailed site-specific data, but and some of you will have that, brilliant, you know, you're ahead of the game if you like, but I suspect the majority of you probably don't have all the site-specific data that you might need. And it's in this instance where we believe that 70% of the picture on time, which is now, we need it now, is better than 100% that's either unaffordable or never comes. So let's look at an example. Actually, this is also a good opportunity to mention Mopani Capital, our sister company, and where I started out. So our methodology has originated from Mopani's natural capital asset model, which has the ability to take what we do a step further because it prices the risk and the value in the risk. And Mopani remains focused on the international market, but also provides the valuation capability for nature capital in the UK if it's required. And Mopani is generally, we've applied our approach internationally, often on assets with a conservation focus and predominantly throughout Africa, but we've done one in Panama and one Southeast East Asia as well. So let's take this project as a quick example. The project Mopani advised on in Gabon for a family office. There's a big difference in scale. First up, 630,000 hectares of aggregated forest, savanna, riverine and marine ecosystem. Amazing project, sits in between 2 national parks and a marine reserve. And just to give you an idea of scale, so this is 630,000 hectares, roughly twice the size of Gloucestershire. So it's a whopping great big place. The scale and the verified additionality that allowed the client to trade in the voluntary carbon market with REDD+ credits is absolutely key. And I recognise, spoke about additionality earlier, I recognise that the additionality calculations in the UK are different and harder to achieve. But my point is that the approach and the methodology that we utilise has been what's been able to underpin the value realisation for this example. So just to conclude, a couple of key takeaways. We believe all landholders, landowners, land managers need to recognise and quantify what natural capital assets they have to inform their decision-making process and manage their exposure to risk. So it doesn't matter if you're a traditional farm or estate, landscape partnership, an organisation, or even a fund. There's a common goal to better understand and appreciate the natural capital on your land. So our approach sets a framework to do exactly this whilst positioning to realise these payment opportunities. I've put our websites up there, naturecapital.co.uk and mopanicapital.com, my email. If you've got any questions, drop me a line, please do get in touch. I hope that's been of interest and helpful. Thank you. Tim, I'm sending this back to you now.
Brilliant, Alex. Thank you so much. That's absolutely brilliant. And just a reminder, we're going to make the presentations available afterwards on our website. So do come and have a look at Alex's profile, and on there you'll see the presentation. We're just going to go into a second survey now. So both David and Alex have a question they'd like you to answer. So this time I'm going to send the link out to everyone rather than just the panelists, which is what I did last time. Apologies for that. So hopefully everyone can see the link in the chat function. Again, if you're in full screen mode, hit escape. That will minimize your screen, copy and paste the link into your browser, and then you can start answering. So the question is, what 3 key things do you believe biodiversity net gain should deliver? Food security, habitats, quality. Okay. If anyone's struggling, do let me know in the chat function. Hopefully, yes, here we go. Okay. Additionality, habitat quality. David, you weren't sure what the answers were going to be here, but here we go. Laws and principles. I saw something about honest results, sustainable development, soil health, habitat biodiversity, additionality, stability, wildlife, results, revenue. Good, I think that's exactly right. Ecosystems, public health, I think I saw that. Yeah. Great. Okay. Everyone, just those who are answering in the chat function, do just grab that link and chuck it into a browser and you'll be able to answer there. quality, sustainability, additionality, wildlife access. Hopefully this is all going to be very useful for you, David. Brilliant.
Yeah,
more wildlife, more revenue. Brilliant. And we're going to make sure all of these results are available later. So you'll see them all on LinkedIn later. So do come and find them there. And you can just have a search for me, Tim Hopkin, and you should find all the results. Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. We'll stop that result there because Alex also has a question. So I'm going to stop those and I'm going to start Alex's question. So Alex's question, if I just go into the present mode and send you across the link. So again, copy and paste the link, put it into a browser, and then Alex's question is, for what activity do you think an environmental-based payment is most likely to support now? So for what activity do you think an environmental-based payment is most likely to support now? Carbon sequestration, carbon sequestration, carbon, tree planting, flood, I'm assuming that's got flood alleviation in there somewhere, carbon, water quality, soil husbandry, increased biodiversity, flood alleviation, yeah, carbon, tree planting, it's growing, increased biodiversity, fantastic, water protection, pollinators, soil husbandry again, carbon is quite clearly at the front, brilliant, public health, management, flood, water. Looks like biodiversity, carbon and water are quite clearly moving to the front. Okay. Flood alleviation, farming, I saw that. Great, 117 answers. Hopefully you can answer more than once. So if you've got more than one answer, please continue to put those in. Just conscious of time, a little bit over, so okay. Brilliant, thank you everybody. That is absolutely fantastic. I think we'll stop that one there. Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. Yes, and we have not only got the word cloud images we'll make available, but we've also got all the answers that go underneath it as well. So if anyone wants to look into the data behind the scenes, it's all anonymous. So if anyone does want to find out more, just do get in touch. Lastly, I'm just going to quickly jump into a quick demo because of time. Just try and glue some of this stuff together. So as you will have seen for those who've attended before, in the Land app, you can import your RPA field boundaries at the click of a button, select your land registry titles, build up basic payment scheme very quickly and easily, and then start producing your UK habitat baseline, which is what Jenny Phelps presented a couple of weeks ago. So I'm just going to quickly show you that essentially once you've pulled in the core data into the Land app, you're able to very quickly define how the land is being used. And I think UK Habitat is certainly looking like the best mechanism for appraising the natural environment, which will allow all sorts of different things like carbon credits to be managed and any uplift in payments for uplift in sort of natural environment, it will all get monitored on UK Hab. So you can easily build this stuff up into the Land app. So we can say in these two woodland blocks that are on the RPA data, you can say that they are, let's say, broadleaf, mixed, and yew. So you can start to really clearly define this. I won't go through it all. I won't bore you with the mapping, but once you've mapped all that out, you can produce an estate report at the click of a button, and it gives you a summary of the holding. So exactly how the land is made up. So here we go, UK Habitat classification, and this is the makeup. And actually, Alex and I are in conversation about, how could we potentially build Alex's model as a bolt-on to the Land app. So again, very quickly and easily, you can start to produce these plans and start to do these natural capital deals with the likes of Alex and David. So I just wanted to quickly demonstrate that, once you've defined that, the natural capital, you can easily start to produce those baseline assessments. The other thing that's worth looking at is looking at the areas where there is payment for the likes of Biodiversity Net Gain. So again, over the coming few weeks and months, we're going to look to work with both David and Alex and produce plans or make available plans that help you instantaneously identify whether you're in a zone eligible for Biodiversity Net Gain or indeed any other natural capital payment. So the idea of the Land app is to help glue landowners to these new market opportunities, and there'll be more information that we'll make available on that. But I will finish there for now. We now are going to go into the Q&A session. So thank you for everyone that's asked lots of questions. And Matthew, I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Tim. Welcome back, everybody. We have had lots of questions, so thank you. So while everyone's been talking, I've been trying to make sense of them. So the first set of questions I'm going to go through to David, if that's okay. David, you're just on mute at the moment. If you want to unmute, and that'd be great. And if your video is working as well, that'd be great. David, when people are talking about, when you're talking about off-site delivery, on what basis do you envisage that happening? Is it kind of going to be distance-driven, or is it by local authority area? And if it is that an opportunity missed? We're talking about landscape scale benefits. You might be some way away from a development with some fantastic landscape opportunities. And you also risk alienating entire areas of the uplands in the UK, and also cross-border issues as well. So just your thoughts really on that nugget.
Thanks, Matthew. I think there's lots of parts to that. I think that proximity principle is really important. So we don't want the off-site areas necessarily delivered a long distance away. But because of the three-tier system, we think that if you do the funding properly, and local authorities sign up to this type of model, then there ought to be enough funding to do all of it. So not just on site, but off site at different locations. So I'm really actually keen to see that some of the larger scale, potentially even more remote sites can actually get properly funded. But actually more funding is likely through an even bigger market when corporate natural capital accounting comes online. And that, I think, where you're not constrained by planning, by the planning system necessarily for distance, that will generate a lot more investment than probably Biodiversity Net Gain from development will do. But we're working at a whole range of scales, and it all depends on how much you can work with the planning authority to see the great benefits of the mechanism at whatever scale and distance from a development area.
Brilliant, thank you. We've had lots of questions about additionality. And Tim Coates asks how you show true additionality on the site that you're going to be generating these new habitats. And Edward asks, sort of linked to that really, does all habitat have to be new, or can existing habitat that a farmer may have funded themselves, can that be used for credits?
The answer is yes, but it all is down to how you apply, or essentially applying the metric to calculate where the additionality lies. So the biggest bangs for your bucks will be where you're converting maybe marginal, but not necessarily marginal arable farmland into something much more valuable. And that's where you get your biggest rise in conservation credits. But if you've already got a habitat which is not necessarily functioning properly, but I don't mean, I'm not looking there at SSSIs that need management, because they should be captured through the management requirement for those SSSIs anyway. But if you've got habitat that could be really substantially improved by investment, then you can actually work out a credit-based mechanism to yield credits. But it won't be, you won't generate as many credits from a restoration scheme as you do from a habitat management and habitat creation and management scheme.
And just taking that one step further, I mean, thinking about the interaction between that and stewardship and elms, are the two mutually exclusive? Are farmers better off waiting to see whether they can capture some of this developer money, or can the two work in harmony?
I think work in harmony. I think I certainly wouldn't be waiting for this if I were a farmer. I'd be getting into elms. But I just had a conversation with government this morning, actually, where we were thinking, could elms do some of the creation work, and all of the long-term 30-year management could be potentially funded through conservation credits. And that's quite a novel thing, because it actually means that the elms money would go further, and of course the BNG money would go further. But it really is a case-by-case basis. And with habitat banks, we need to be setting them up now so that they are ready to generate credits that can be purchased by developers next year. I mean, we're already doing this, but on smaller bespoke sites. But what I want to see are the bigger scale sites that can really generate a transformational change in what the countryside looks like, frankly.
Yeah. And Thomas Pearson asks if the 10% sort of net gain threshold is sufficient, and some local authorities possibly asking for more, and what's your view?
Well, I think it's up to the planning authority to decide on what they feel is appropriate in their area. I mean, certainly it's got to be a minimum of 10%, but there are others that are using 25%, and that's completely legitimate. They can set and do as they wish, and that's right. I mean, but what I would say is that if you look at a 100-hectare housing scheme, it's a big housing scheme. It generates about 2,800 houses at normal density. The cost of doing 10% of the biodiversity net gain delivery, if you really drill it down, we've had these figures checked by land agents and planners, it costs around £73 million to deliver 10% biodiversity net gain on the site. Now, I think that's great if they want to do 10% on site, but obviously the more you do, the more costly it is. You can deliver the whole requirement for biodiversity net gain, the 100% of the biodiversity net gain required, you can deliver that for £8 million through a habitat bank. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing things on site. You purely should, but you might be doing things in the local community that's additional, and as well as habitat banks. That's where the 3-tier approach comes in.
I think the higher figure is probably a useful bargaining chip to start your negotiations, though. But so, Alex, moving on to yourself, Mick makes the point that when we've got sort of funded net gain schemes or carbon or water schemes, quite often due to climate or disease, these can fail. And just thinking about who might be liable for the replacement of those if that actually happens.
So, I mean, I tend to look at this more as you're doing a commercial transaction. So it doesn't matter if you can take it from a lot of land managers on here, a commercial property transaction. Solicitors draw up an agreement if it's over 3 years or 7 years, and that's part of the nature of it. So you're then held liable if you then don't fulfill. So if you plant a load of trees, for example, and you've got a high deer population and squirrel population, and they go through it, and your density drops from 800 down to 10 per acre, well, you're going to be liable because actually you haven't fulfilled the obligations that you'd signed up to and received the money on the back of it. So I think it sits with both parties as part of that agreement to begin with.
Yeah. And just from a sustainability point of view, Alex, you talked about community. You mentioned community impact as part of your sustainability matrix. When you're talking about a community, do you consider the impact on the economy? And I'm thinking specifically, in the rural area. I mean, post Brexit, everybody was talking about planting lots of trees in the uplands, and one of the side effects of that, of course, is that trees don't necessarily make communities. And does that impact get considered in that sort of matrix?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have to look at it in the whole. So the actual planting of the tree can have a number of different effects, but do people have access to that? Is that in a culturally significant area? And all those things become more important if you exclude people from an area or don't have permissive access. You're unlikely to potentially score as highly or to actually start to realize that. And when you then look at it from a corporate offset perspective, if part of your deal and you're a landholder and you say, no, we don't want anyone going anywhere near this, well, that might be less attractive for the offset partner or partners that you're trying to do that with. So it's a balance, but it may be critical from a wildlife perspective that can't be disturbed all the time if it's to breed successfully. So it's trying to find that balance, and that's where the negotiation comes in as part of the deal.
Yeah, and I mean, just from a regulation perspective, do you feel that the regulators out there do they sort of trust your methodologies and the way you're working?
So, well, this is part of the problem, and this is why everyone says, the carbon market, and they consider it sort of the Wild West. And there's been numerous journalistic articles saying, you know, it is the Wild West. And I mean, our example of Gabon and carbon offset, you need the verified standards if people from the UK are going to use a carbon credit system to offset in Gabon, because they can't just pop over there and go and check it. If you're in Oxford, let's say, and you pop out 20 minutes outside Oxford and you can start to offset your footprint there, your business can be carbon neutral. That's, you know, you've got much more accountability. It's much more achievable. And so you can hold people to account from that perspective. So that's why the UK as a whole has got the ability. We don't have to offshore it. We may do, and some of the larger projects will, but I hope they don't. I hope much more of it is kept, and we do it within the UK.
Yeah. Final question is actually a joint question to both of you. So Alex, perhaps if you want to answer it first, and then David, if you could chip in. I mean, I think, you know, this just came in from Jeremy Murphy. There's lots of organisations, there's lots of government agencies out there, there's NGOs, and they've all got, you know, there's some similar environmental net gain agendas out there, in many different forms. Is there an opportunity to consolidate all of this and to sort of really focus the efforts as an industry to make it clear not only for developers but landowners, local authorities? Is there an opportunity to consolidate and work together and perhaps eliminate some of that duplication?
Yes, definitely. Ultimately, it needs to be done, you know, by the government, and I think it's Natural England, their enabling natural capital assessment toolkit. Little things like that start to standardise the industry. But obviously, there's a huge amount to do. From our perspective, we're really trying to arm landowners, land managers, land holders with the information to be able to actually, you know, get out there, be proactive, and do it themselves. And so, yes, in an ideal world, that's where we get to. We will, over a period of time, I'm sure get there. But it's being more proactive and getting there a bit quicker, I would hope.
And David, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd support what Alex said there. I mean, I think what I would say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We just got to get on with this. We've spent we've had 1 million houses in the market at the moment, in the build market at the moment, that in the planning system at the moment, that really ought to be doing this. And, you know, we're great in the conservation sector at prevaricating and taking a long time to get anywhere. Collaboration is essential, and we do need a good standardization. We've got the DEFRA metric, which it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. We use it really, really well, we think. And the next thing will be the need for accreditation of sites, that sort of thing. And we're already going to do some self-accreditation just purely because we think it's really important. And hopefully government or the British Standard might take that on and modify it to improve it. So, but what I would say is I don't want to wait 5 more years before we've got a perfect solution, because we never will have. We just got to get on with it. And that means that there will be some overlap as we go along. But we could be doing a lot more better by collaborating. At the moment, we just find 10 reasons why it's all too difficult to do something, and frankly, that's not a place I want to be anymore.
No, well, getting things done is hopefully one outcome of this webinar series. So, David and Alex, thank you very much for your speeches today, and thank you for answering those questions. Thank you everybody for joining us this week. Hopefully, you've all found it useful. You'll get an email from Tim with a link to the recording. There'll also be a feedback form. It's great to get your feedback so we can continually sort of refine these episodes. So next week we have got Rob Hindle from Rural Solutions and Jeremy Clitheroe, who's one of my colleagues at the Duchy of Cornwall, and their topic is on whole estate planning. So we look forward to seeing you all next week, Thursday, 4:30. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well. Thank you.